Sometimes I have to keep track of myself, make sure that I come back and so that everybody can come back with me, because I love those times of quiet and use of the imagination to bring home a truth. But I'm not going to let you off the hook. I'm going to keep your imaginations going, and I'd like you to imagine something with me as we begin this talk. Imagine that you finally got around to taking the vacation you postponed for so long. For me, it's probably more than 2, maybe 2.5 years. But finally, you've gotten to it and you're taking the vacation that you postponed. You're setting aside work. You're setting aside all of the lists that you've made yourself to do. You've set aside even expectations of yourself for a time. You are taking a vacation. And the choice of place for you is a beautiful, pristine lake, clear water, fed by a spring. At the other end of the lake, a small waterfall lets the water out. And it's a very alive and life-giving situation for you. It's surrounded by mountains, beautiful, and trees at the edge. It's just the perfect place for this vacation. And there you are at this lake, and not only at the lake, but in the lake. You have a rubber raft, and you're on that raft in the middle of the lake. The sun is shining down. It is absolutely perfect. So do you have that scene in your mind? We'll change the scene just a little bit. And I want you to go from that seemingly timeless place to a real timeless place where you're watching yourself at that lake in a time-lapse video. You know, those ones where time goes on quite some time, but you see it in a short period of time. And as you're viewing this time-lapse video, you note one thing. There's that waterfall that was at the edge of the lake where the water flowed out and on into a stream. And that waterfall has been blocked up. The sun has gotten hotter. And suddenly, the only outlet for the water in that lake is by evaporation. And so it evaporates. And the lake seemingly remains the same, except that some algae begins to form on the surface of the lake. And it begins to seem to be a little bit muddy, not so clear as it was. And in time, you find yourself in the middle of a polluted lake. That ideal vacation spot has changed in the time-lapse photography. Reset the camera, still in time-lapse mode. And you see yourself again on the pristine lake, and then you see that the stream that fed the lake, that spring that was so fresh, has stopped. Because the stream has stopped, the sun now being hot, the lake level begins to fall and fall and fall. And then through the miracle of time lapse, eventually all of the water has gone out of that lake. And there's nothing but mud and minerals caked at the bottom of the lake bed. So this imagination that we've done, this little exercise, is the way it is with life of spirit. The new and the fresh must continue to come in order for life to be sustained and for that life-giving nature of the lake to continue. And what is no longer useful must go out in the life of spirit, or it becomes stagnant. And that which was intended to be beautiful becomes clogged. There's stoppage, and life just doesn't move very much at all. This is how it works with the life of spirit. So I call this inlet and outlet. Inlet of the lake, outlet of the lake, but inlet in terms of the life of spirit, and outlet in terms of the life of spirit. And that's what I want to talk about today. We have our Unity 12 powers, and one of those 12 powers originally was used the term elimination. It's kind of a funny sounding word, and we often now use release as the term for that. But let's use the term elimination for just a minute. The power of elimination that we have is the ability to be able to release, to remove, to deny, and to let go. What a wonderful spiritual power, a divine power within all of us. Charles Fillmore, also one of our founders, called this power renunciation. And here's what he had to say about it: a letting go of old thoughts in order that new thoughts may find a place in consciousness. So we also talk, if you've been around Unity a little bit, about denial. We talk about it usually in terms of coupling it with the affirmations and denials. But denial is something maybe just a little bit different than that exercise as well. But it's the absence of an impulse that sustains something not useful. The absence of the impulse that sustains something or builds something that's not useful. I don't know if it's true of you, but I'm pretty sure that it is, that you often keep around things in your life that don't serve you very well, that clog things up, that block things from moving forward, but you're comfortable with them, so you keep them around. This is very true for me, and we'll get a little more specific in a minute about what those things might be for you and how to let them go, how to let that outlet be fully functioning so that things don't get polluted, because if you keep those things around it long enough, the whole of your life situation gets gummed up, gets kind of stinky, to tell you the truth. But we still hang on and do not let those things go. There's a story in the Hebrew scriptures that I'll bet you remember a little bit of anyway. There was a comrade of Abram, that man of faith in the Old Testament. Name was Lot. And Lot hung out with Abraham, and some of that faith rubbed up on Lot. But Lot chose to take up residence in the city of Sodom. I'm sure you know that reference, Sodom and Gomorrah. And the city got worse and worse, and Lot tried to tough it out and live out his faith. And at one point, 2 angels came to visit Lot and warned him that the excesses, that the negativity of that city, of that situation, was going to doom it, and that he needed to escape that. In fact, the people of the city demanded that the angels who had come to visit would be handed over to them, because they did not want that speaking out about the way they had structured their lives and their society to go on. Lot resisted that, even offered his daughters in exchange, but the angels continued to counsel Lot to leave the city so that he would not get caught up in the destruction of that city. Well, he did. He and his family. And on the way out of the city, one of his party, in fact, his wife, looked back at the city of Gomorrah. And the story goes that Lot's wife turned into a pillar of salt. There's a bit of a metaphysical truth there in that story, because it is the turning back, the embracing, the unwillingness to let go of what was negative, what did not serve, what was not rising in consciousness, but was lowering, debasing, the inability to turn back, the comfort, the wish to still have some of that, that absolutely turned Lot's wife into a pillar of salt. And the principle and the truth in that is that as we continue to embrace that, which is not for our good and which we sometimes know is not for our good, we are paralyzed and cannot, in fact, move forward. There's a daily word. In fact, Donna and I talked about it, and we even thought about bringing it into today's daily word for this service that I think is really pertinent here. And it was the daily word for this last Friday. I want to read just a little bit of it for you. And it goes back to the idea of flow that we started with and the idea of letting go. God's love and goodness flow through my life like a river that can never run dry. To receive, however, I must let go and let the awareness of God pour into me. Like the operator of a dam, I can create resistance and stop the flow of water from coming through, or I can create an inlet, letting water in, and an outlet, letting out the unnecessary and the unuseful. So when I set up a description of the message for today, I wrote, the divine waits for a welcome on the threshold of our experience. When we clear the debris, the useless clutter, and the blockages that clog our lives and our minds, we pave the way to acceptance and the beautiful reign of spirit. We talk about good things coming into our life and the absolute benevolence of the divine, and that is our very nature. But today I want to just focus a little bit on the idea of removing that clutter, that debris, those blockages that keep us from experiencing that flow of life, that goodness of the divine. So I've taken and put together 3 areas, and you probably can come up with many more that are pertinent to you, but I want to just talk about them for a moment. In terms of making sure there's an inlet and an outlet, one of the areas that I look at is that of spiritual wellness. And spiritual wellness to me breaks down into just a couple of things that I would mention. I would say mediating and managing the stressors of life. Right now may be a time for many of us to have stressors of life. I was talking with someone a few days ago who spoke about some stressors in their life. And as they spoke about it, they said, well, I just had to take a break. I just had to go out and do some things. I had to go out and do some errands, just get out and just get away from it all. And chose that method, that way of mediating the stressors of life. Now, there are professional ways to do this, but there are also ways that we can use our God-given talent, our mind, our choice, our power of choice to turn away from, for a moment, those stressors, to give ourselves relief. It's a wonderful aspect of self-care that we can do. So I think for spiritual wellness, mediating or managing the stressors in our life is important, and that's an ongoing conversation. And I recommend that you become involved in that. Something that's come up also with regard to spiritual wellness is the idea that a blockage for us can be stifling play and creative expression. So often I don't take the time to play. I'm learning. We scheduled our play date, so I'm on the move there. But we stifle play too often because we're so serious about life, and we stifle creative expression. And when we're able to take away that blockage of clamping down on ourselves and keeping us from being engaged in that, we allow the flow of life and the outflow of those things uh, that do no longer serve us. And another one is expressing generosity. How often do we just not make judgments, but settle back and say, I'm blessed. Let me give. And take that impulse to give that comes to all of us and just act on it. Don't judge it, just act on it. I think those are ways to engage in spiritual wellness. I think another area that is very important is that of relationships. And again, we don't go into it too deeply, but I think it's an important area. Do we, in fact, let go of, release people and situations that hold us back? Sometimes we get so connected. We have this dance with some people that we just can't let go of. We keep getting engaged and engaged again, and letting go of that dance, and sometimes even that relationship, or setting boundaries in that, is important, because it's only as we let go that we experience the life of spirit flooding in on the other side of the equation. And then there's the idea of letting go of resentments. I don't know if you have had resentments in your life that you've carried on for years. I certainly have. One particularly with my mother. And only as I began to let that go, or was able to begin to let that go, could I take away that which blocked that full expression and that full involvement in a flourishing life of spirit. And then I think there's one more, and this one really is personal for me, that I want to mention. Procrastination or avoidance of what is mine to do. I'm going to speak um, personally here. I'm terming it spiritual loitering. Sometimes I just hang around, don't get to it, put it off, find something else to do. Um, just don't get to something that I know that is mine to do. And I'd like to be released from that spiritual loitering. Could also be hanging on to an addiction. I don't necessarily mean a substance addiction so much as I do um, uh, something that just has a grip on us. For me, it might be sweets or food. That's a weak point for me, weak spot for me. But hanging, and again, these are things that may need professional help, depending on where you're at. But making that choice, setting your mind to letting that go, making that intention. One thing I love about our intenders circle is that we set intentions and get support for that. Um, and that's the other thing about the procrastination of what's yours to do, or not getting to what is yours to do, is that with support, with the support of our spiritual family, with support of those really good friends who can help you, with the support of a counselor. You find your support, what really works for you. Having that support will help you in that area. For me, Intender Circle is really helpful. And that is the cusp of where I'm at, not procrastinating those things that I know that it's mine to do, and I'm finding something else just to do that. All of these things that I've mentioned, and many more that you could list yourself, are blockages that keep you from experiencing the full life of spirit, because we just don't let go. And that's what leads to acceptance. I ran into, as I was preparing, a wonderful scripture that I like, and I'd like to just close with that. Comes from the prophet Isaiah. Ho, everyone that thirsts, come to the waters, and you that have no money, come, buy and eat. Come, buy wine and milk without money and without price. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which does not satisfy? Listen carefully to me and eat what is good, and delight yourself in rich food. Incline your ear and come to me. Listen so that you may live. And so it is. Amen.